In a quiet suburb of Portland, Oregon, nestled among the tree-lined streets of the Hawthorne district, 24-year-old bride Emily Harper was living the early days of her newlywed bliss. Emily, a recent graduate with a degree in literature, worked as an English teacher at a local high school. She had married her husband, Jake Mitchell, a 28-year-old software engineer, on May 15th, 2024, in a charming spring ceremony at the historic Crystal Springs Rhododendron Garden. The wedding was filled with laughter, love, and the promise of a bright future. Their new home was a cozy 2-story house on Southeast 32nd Avenue, purchased with Jake's savings and Emily's modest teaching salary. They spent weeks decorating, turning the space into a reflection of their shared dreams. Emily's love for books filled the living room with shelves, while Jake's tech gadgets adorned his home office. The neighborhood was peaceful, with friendly neighbors and the occasional sound of children playing. They were unaware that this tranquility would soon shatter. One neighbor stood out, Robert Bob Hensley, a 42-year-old mechanic living in a rundown bungalow next door. With greasy hands and a disheveled appearance, Bob was a loner, known for his odd behavior but generally left alone. His small garage was cluttered with tools and old car parts, where he spent late nights tinkering. Emily's beauty, long auburn hair, bright green eyes, and a gentle smile, immediately caught his attention. What began as curiosity soon twisted into an unhealthy obsession. Bob's days became consumed with thoughts of Emily. He watched her routine through his curtains, leaving for work at 7:30 a.m., returning by 4 p.m., and tending her garden on weekends. His already unstable mind, strained by years of isolation and untreated mental illness, conjured dark fantasies. He imagined her as his possession, the line between reality and delusion blurring. His fixation grew dangerous. On the humid evening of August 28th, 2024, as the sun set, Emily stepped outside to water her roses. Dressed in a light summer dress, she hummed softly, unaware of Bob's gaze. With Jake working late, Bob's obsession reached a breaking point. Armed with a hunting knife from his garage and fueled by manic desire, he slipped out into the night, his heart pounding with anticipation and rage. The attack unfolded swiftly. As Emily bent to adjust a sprinkler, Bob emerged from the shadows of the neighboring yard. Before she could scream, he grabbed her hair, yanking her backward. Terrified, Emily struggled, her cries muffled as Bob's gloved hand clamped over her mouth. In a frenzied moment, his intent to assault her turned deadly. A sudden thrust of the knife pierced her chest, and within seconds, her struggles ceased. Blood pooled on the wet grass, reflecting the dim street lights as fog rolled in, cloaking the horrific scene in eerie silence. Bob panicked, realizing what he'd done. He dragged Emily's lifeless body toward his garage, intending to hide the evidence. The sound of Mrs. Clara Thompson's dog barking alerted the 60-year-old retiree next door. Peering out her window, she saw the struggle and dialed 911 at 9:47 p.m. Within minutes, police sirens pierced the night, marking the beginning of a nightmare in the Hawthorne district. Bob's mind raced as he tried to cover his tracks, but the evidence was overwhelming. Emily's torn dress and the blood-stained knife in his hand left little doubt. He stood frozen, muttering incoherently as the reality of his actions sank in. The once quiet street transformed into a crime scene with flashing lights and the murmur of shocked neighbors. Portland Police Department detectives, led by Sergeant Mark Delaney, arrived within 15 minutes. The air was thick with tension as officers cordoned off the area, their flashlights cutting through the fog. Emily's body lay partially concealed behind Bob's garage, her torn dress and pale skin a grim testament to the violence. The rusty knife, still clutched in Bob's trembling hand, was the first clue. Officers subdued him as he stood frozen, blood staining his apron. Delaney, a seasoned investigator with 20 years on the force, noted the brutality. "This wasn't planned," he muttered to Detective Lisa Chen. "Looks like a spontaneous outburst." Forensic teams collected evidence: hair strands, blood splatter, and fingerprints on the knife. Dr. Helen Ruiz, the coroner, estimated the time of death between 9:30 and 9:45 p.m., confirming a single fatal stab wound to the heart. Jake arrived home at 10:15 p.m., his face paling as officers broke the news. "No, Emily," he sobbed, collapsing into a chair as neighbors gathered, whispering in shock. Mrs. Thompson provided a key witness statement describing Bob's erratic behavior. "He'd stare at her garden for hours," she said, her voice shaking. "I should have said something." Detectives searched Bob's home, uncovering photos of Emily, a journal with obsessive ramblings, and a stash of weapons. An entry dated August 27th read, "She was mine to take." The evidence painted a clear picture. Bob, a troubled loner, had snapped. By midnight, he was in custody at the Multnomah County Detention Center, charged with murder and assault. The community reeled as vigils began. By January 2025, preparations for Bob Hensley's trial were underway at the Multnomah County Courthouse. Prosecutor Sarah Lindsay led the state's team, gathering robust evidence. Forensic reports, witness statements, and items from Bob's home. Lindsay, with 15 years of experience, planned to highlight Bob's mental state, anticipating a defense plea of diminished responsibility. Bob's defense attorney, John Crawford, requested a psychiatric evaluation. Dr. Richard Paul, a renowned psychiatrist, diagnosed Bob with schizophrenia and paranoid delusions. He was detached from reality, Paul testified, but this doesn't mean he planned the murder. This assessment could sway the trial, potentially reducing his culpability or securing an acquittal. Jake and Emily's mother, Mary Harper, a 50-year-old supply manager, prepared for the emotional ordeal. Mary feared Bob might escape justice. "He stole my daughter," she wept. Jake remained silent but was determined to seek justice, joining a support group for victims' families. The prosecution focused on Bob's journal, with entries like, "She was mine," linking his obsession to the crime. The defense countered with his mental illness, setting the stage for a heated courtroom battle. The trial commenced on February 10th, 2025, in the Multnomah County Courthouse, presided over by Judge Ellen Foster, with 30 years of experience. Prosecutor Sarah Lindsay opened with a compelling case, presenting forensic evidence and Clara Thompson's testimony. "His face was wild," Clara recalled, trembling. The rusty knife and blood evidence underscored the intent. Defense attorney John Crawford emphasized Bob's mental state, citing Dr. Paul's report. "He didn't understand his actions," Crawford argued. The prosecution countered with the autopsy, proving a deliberate stab wound. The 12-member jury listened intently, their faces reflecting confusion. Jake testified, recounting Emily's kind nature. "She only wanted to do good," he said, holding back tears. Mary confronted Bob, shouting, "You ruined my life," creating a dramatic moment. Bob remained silent, his eyes vacant. Lindsay read his journal aloud, shocking the jury. Crawford pleaded for leniency due to mental illness. The day ended after 3 hours, with both sides presenting strong arguments. The trial commenced on February 10, 2025, in the Multnomah County Courthouse, presided over by Judge Ellen Foster, with 30 years of experience. Prosecutor Sarah Lindsay opened with the compelling case, presenting forensic evidence and Clara Thompson's testimony. "His face was wild," Clara recalled, trembling. The rusty knife and blood evidence underscored the intent. Defense attorney John Crawford emphasized Bob's mental state, citing Dr. Paul's report. "He didn't understand his actions," Crawford argued. The prosecution countered with the autopsy, proving a deliberate stab wound. The 12-member jury listened intently, their faces reflecting confusion. Jake testified, recounting Emily's kind nature. "She only wanted to do good," he said, holding back tears. Mary confronted Bob, shouting, "You ruined my life," creating a dramatic moment. Bob remained silent, his eyes vacant. Lindsay read his journal aloud, shocking the jury. Crawford pleaded for leniency due to mental illness. The day ended after 3 hours, with both sides presenting strong arguments. February 12, 2025, saw the prosecution's closing arguments. Sarah Lindsay delivered a powerful summation, weaving together forensic evidence, witness accounts, and Bob's journal. "This was a calculated act of possession turned deadly," she declared, displaying crime scene photos. She emphasized Bob's premeditated stalking, undermining the insanity defense. Lindsay called a final witness, Detective Mark Delaney, who detailed the investigation's thoroughness. "The evidence leaves no doubt," he stated. The prosecution rested, confident in their case. The defense countered with a plea for mercy, reiterating Bob's mental decline. Judge Foster instructed the jury, outlining first-degree murder criteria and the insanity plea's high bar. The jury retired to deliberate, their faces stern. Outside, Jake and Mary waited anxiously, supported by friends. News crews gathered, the trial captivating Portland. The community held its breath, aware the verdict would shape their sense of safety. Over the next 2 days, February 13th to 14th, 2025, the jury deliberated in a locked room. Tensions ran high as they reviewed evidence, the knife, photos, and testimony. Some jurors leaned toward guilt, citing Bob's actions, while others debated his mental state. "He knew what he was doing," one argued. "No, he was sick," another countered. Debates grew heated, but by the evening of the 14th, a consensus emerged. The foreman, a 45-year-old accountant named David Lee, announced they had reached a verdict. The jury returned to the courtroom, their expressions unreadable. Jake squeezed Mary's hand, both bracing for the outcome. The district buzzed with anticipation, the trial's resolution looming large. On February 15, 2025, the courtroom fell silent as Judge Foster called for the verdict. The foreman read, "We find the defendant, Robert Hensley, guilty of first-degree murder." A gasp rippled through the room. The insanity plea failed. The jury deemed Bob's actions intentional despite his illness. Foster nodded, her face stern. Lindsay smiled faintly, vindicated. Jake wept, a mix of relief and grief, while Mary whispered, Thank you. Bob stared blankly as officers prepared to escort him away. The judge scheduled sentencing for March 1st, 2025, hinting at a severe penalty. Outside, vigils honored Emily, her memory enduring amid the community's healing process. On March 1st, 2025, Judge Foster sentenced Bob to life imprisonment without parole. "Your actions were a deliberate violation of life," she stated. Bob was led away, his fate sealed. Jake began writing a memoir about Emily, finding solace in her legacy. Mary joined a victims advocacy group, channeling her pain into action. The Hawthorne District planted a tree in Emily's memory, a symbol of resilience. Bob received psychiatric care in prison, but his guilt remained unassuaged. The community slowly recovered, though Emily's death left a lasting scar, fostering a cautious vigilance among residents. Her story became a cautionary tale, reminding all of the darkness that can lurk behind quiet facades.